I still remember the sound of his voice, my brother, Ethan. He used to call my name in that cheerful way that made our small house in Vermont feel warmer than any fireplace ever could. But one morning he stopped. Just like that. No fight. No goodbye. Just silence. I told myself it was nothing, maybe he was busy, maybe tired. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and that silence became louder than any argument we ever had. It followed me everywhere. In the kitchen while I made coffee, in the quiet evenings when Mom used to hum old country songs, and even when I tried to sleep. I used to think that family bonds couldn't break, not really. But the day Ethan stopped calling my name, I learned something. Sometimes, love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades one unspoken word at a time. Ethan and I grew up in a small town in Vermont, surrounded by tall maple trees and long, quiet winters. Our house sat at the end of a gravel road, with a white fence that leaned a little too much to the left and a mailbox that had our last name painted in blue letters, the Matthews. Our parents weren't rich, but they gave us everything that really mattered. Dad worked at a local hardware store, and Mom was a school librarian. Most nights, she'd read to us by the fireplace while the wind rattled the windows. I'd curl up on the couch under a quilt, and Ethan would sit cross-legged on the floor, pretending not to listen, but smiling every time she changed her voice for the characters. He was 2 years older than me, the kind of brother who always looked out for me. When I scraped my knee, he was the one who ran for a Band-Aid. When I was scared of thunder, he'd sneak into my room with a flashlight and say, "Hey, don't worry, Lila. I'm right here." And somehow I always believed him. We went to the same high school, shared the same group of friends, and even worked the same summer job at Mr. Turner's grocery store. He bagged groceries while I rang up customers, and we'd laugh when we caught each other stealing candy bars from the counter. Life felt simple back then. Sunday dinners, family picnics by the lake, 4th of July fireworks with paper cups of lemonade. There was a sense of us, like no matter what happened, we'd always come back to that little white house at the end of the road. But life, as I've learned, doesn't warn you before it changes. Just shifts, quietly like the seasons. The first small crack appeared when Ethan went off to college in Boston. I still remember the morning he left. The air smelled like rain, and his old blue duffel bag sat by the door. He hugged Mom, shook Dad's hand, and turned to me with that half-smile he always had. "Don't let them miss me too much, okay?" he said. And I laughed, not knowing how much I'd miss him. For the first few months he called often, Sunday evenings mostly. We'd talk about his classes, his roommate, how different city life was. But slowly the calls came less often. And when they did, something felt off. He sounded distant, polite, but not warm. Like a guest in his own home. Mom said he was just growing up. Dad said boys needed space. But I felt something deeper, a kind of wall being built brick by brick, word by word. Still I held on. I kept texting, calling, sending him pictures of home. The first snowfall, Mom's new garden. Even the old family dog curled up by the porch. He'd reply sometimes with a short "looks nice," or tell Mom I said hi. But he never asked about me. It hurt, though I didn't say it. I just told myself he's busy. He'll come around. But deep down a quiet fear began to grow. A fear that maybe, just maybe, the Ethan I knew was slowly disappearing. The first real change came during Thanksgiving. It had been nearly a year since Ethan left for Boston, and I'd been counting the days to see him. Mom made her famous pumpkin pie, and Dad cleaned the garage just so there'd be space for Ethan's car. I remember helping set the table. The old china plates, the folded napkins, the candles that smelled like cinnamon. Everything felt ready, perfect even. But when Ethan arrived, something was different. He wore a fancy gray coat, carried a new phone, and had this air about him like he didn't quite belong here anymore. He hugged Mom and Dad politely, but when it came to me, he just smiled and said, "Hey Lila. You look different." I wanted to laugh, to joke like old times, but his tone felt distant, as if we were old classmates, not siblings. During dinner, he talked about his new internship at a marketing firm. Words like strategy and networking filled the room. Mom nodded proudly, and Dad asked questions about his boss. I just listened, smiling but feeling invisible. He didn't ask me about school, or my art project I'd been so excited to show him. He barely looked my way. After dessert, he stepped outside to take a phone call. When I followed a few minutes later, I overheard him say, "Yeah, it's just my folks' place." I'll be back in the city tomorrow night. Something in my chest sank. Tomorrow night. He was only staying one day. That night I lay awake in my room, listening to the creak of the old house and thinking about the brother who used to sneak in just to talk. Now his door stayed shut. And when morning came, his car was gone before breakfast. From then on, it became a pattern. He came home less, called less, and when he did, it was always rushed. He'd say things like, "Sorry, Lil, I've got a meeting," or, "I'll call you later, okay?" But later never came. Mom pretended not to notice, though I could see the sadness in her eyes every time she reheated food he'd promised to come home for. Dad grew quieter too. And me? I stopped trying to fill the silence with hope. Years passed like that. I graduated from college, got a small job at a local bookstore, and tried to build a life. But no matter how busy I got, there was always an empty chair in my heart where my brother used to sit. Then one winter Mom got sick. Nothing dramatic at first, just fatigue, some coughing, but it grew worse. Doctors said it was serious. I called Ethan right away, my hands shaking. He picked up after the third ring, his voice calm, professional. "Hey Lil, what's up?" "Ethan, it's Mom. She's not doing well. The doctor thinks you should come." There was a pause long enough to make my throat tighten. He sighed. "I have a presentation next week. I'll try, okay?" "I'll try." Try. That word stayed with me. He didn't say he would come, just that he'd try. When Mom passed a few months later, Ethan showed up 2 days late. He walked into the church after the service was over, holding white roses. People whispered, but no one said anything. I watched him place the flowers near her photo, his hands trembling slightly. When he looked up at me, our eyes met for a moment, then he looked away. At the reception, he barely spoke. I tried to start a conversation to tell him I missed him, but he just nodded, said he had to get back soon. He left before sunset. That night, I sat alone in Mom's room, touching the empty side of her bed, and whispered, "Why did he leave us, Mom? What did I do wrong?" But the only answer was silence, that same silence that had been growing between us for years. Still, a part of me refused to give up. I kept sending him birthday messages, Christmas cards, little updates about Dad. Most went unanswered. And slowly, the name Ethan became something I said less and less. Until one day I realized I hadn't heard my brother call my name in nearly 8 years. Not once. It was early spring when I finally decided to visit him. After years of waiting for a call that never came, I realized I couldn't carry the silence anymore. Dad had passed away the previous winter, and I felt alone in a way that scared me. The house was too quiet, the walls too full of ghosts. So one morning I packed a small bag, got in my old car and drove the 4 hours to Boston. The highway stretched endlessly, lined with melting snow and bare trees. Every mile I drove, I rehearsed what I'd say. "I miss you. Why did you stop talking to me?" But the words felt too heavy, too late. When I reached his apartment building, I almost turned back. It was a tall glass tower with people in suits rushing in and out. He'd built a life so different from mine. Polished, modern, distant. Still, I walked to the front desk and told the receptionist, "I'm his sister, Lila Matthews." She smiled kindly. "I'll call him for you." A few minutes later, Ethan appeared in the lobby. For a moment I just stared. He looked older, sharper jawline, a few gray strands in his hair, expensive coat, but his eyes were tired. When he saw me, his expression froze. "Lila," he said softly, like he wasn't sure it was really me. I nodded. "Hi, Ethan." We went to a small cafe around the corner. The city buzzed outside, but inside it was quiet, filled with the sound of clinking cups and soft jazz. He sat across from me, fidgeting with his phone. Felt like we were strangers. Finally I spoke. "I didn't come to fight. I just need to know what happened. You stopped calling. You stopped being my brother. Why?" He looked away, staring at the rain streaking the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Because I couldn't handle it anymore." "Handle what?" I whispered. He took a deep breath. "After I left for college, everything changed for me. I felt like I didn't fit in back home anymore. I wanted to make something of myself, to be someone. But every time I came back, I felt like that scared little kid again. Like no matter how far I went, I'd always be just Ethan from Vermont." I frowned. But that's not a bad thing. That's home. He shook his head. Not for me. I wanted to move forward, Lila. But you kept pulling me back. The pictures, the calls, the reminders of everything I left behind. I didn't know how to tell you without hurting you. I sat there stunned. So instead you just disappeared? His eyes glistened. Yeah. I thought if I stayed quiet maybe you'd stop waiting. Maybe you'd hate me. It would be easier that way. For a long time I couldn't speak. All the memories, the holidays he missed, Mom's funeral, the empty years, rushed back like cold water. You think ignoring someone is easier than telling the truth? I said quietly. He looked down. I was selfish, Lila. I thought distance would protect me from guilt. But it only made it worse. We sat in silence. The waiter brought coffee we didn't touch. Outside, the rain turned into snow, soft, slow, forgiving. After a while, Ethan reached into his coat pocket and took out a small envelope. I kept this, he said, sliding it across the table. It was a letter. Yellowed at the edges, the handwriting familiar. Mom's. My breath caught. Where did you get this? She gave it to me before I left for Boston, he said. She told me to open it when I felt lost. I never did. Until last month. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. Mom's words were gentle, written in her tidy cursive. My dear Ethan, no matter where life takes you, don't forget where you came from. Home isn't a place. It's the people who call your name when you've lost your way. By the time I finished reading, my eyes were full of tears. Ethan's voice broke as he said, I realized. I've been running from the very people who loved me most. I didn't even come when she needed me. I don't know how to forgive myself for that. I reached across the table and took his hand. The city outside blurred, and for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of my brother again. You don't have to be forgiven, I said softly. You just have to come home. He nodded, silent tears running down his face. And then for the first time in 8 years he said my name quietly but full of meaning. Lila. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just real. And in that single word, all the years of silence began to melt away. After that day in Boston, things didn't magically go back to how they were. There were no grand apologies, no dramatic reunions, just small, hesitant steps. But sometimes small steps are all you need to start walking home again. Ethan called me the next week, twice actually. Nothing serious, just short conversations about work, the weather, the new bookstore I was managing in town. Still, every time I saw his name flash on my phone, my heart felt a little lighter. A month later, he drove down for the weekend. When I saw his car pull into the driveway, the same spot he used to park when we were kids, I had to take a deep breath to stop the tears. He stepped out, holding a small potted plant in his hands. Thought the garden could use something new, he said. It was a sunflower, Mom's favorite. We didn't talk much that first evening. We just sat on the porch, wrapped in sweaters, listening to the crickets and watching the stars. The same stars we used to count as kids, lying on our backs in the grass. I remember whispering, I miss this. He nodded. Me too. It was strange how silence, the same thing that once tore us apart, now felt peaceful again. Because this time it wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. Over the next few months, Ethan started visiting more often. Sometimes he'd bring groceries, sometimes old family photos he'd found while cleaning his apartment. He even helped me repaint the kitchen, that same pale yellow Mom loved. While we worked, we talked. About her, about Dad, about all the years we lost and the things we both wished we'd said. One evening, as we were putting away brushes, Ethan said quietly, I used to think success meant leaving everything behind. But now I see it means having something worth coming back to. I smiled. You never really left, Ethan. You just forgot how to come home. He laughed softly. Guess I needed a little reminder. That summer, we decided to visit the lake where our family used to spend every 4th of July. The old picnic table was still there, worn and faded, but the air felt the same warm, full of the scent of pine and distant barbecues. We sat side by side, our feet dangling over the dock, the water glistening beneath the sunset. Ethan pulled out a folded photograph. The 4 of us, smiling by the water, Mom's arm around both of us. He held it for a long time before saying, I wish I could tell her I'm sorry. I placed my hand on his. You just did. He looked at me, eyes red, and whispered, "Thank you, Lila, for not giving up on me." I smiled. That's what family does. We wait, even when it hurts. We stayed there until the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel that ache of loneliness. Just peace, soft, steady, familiar. Weeks later, he called again. This time, his voice sounded lighter, warmer. "Hey, Lil," he said, almost cheerfully. "I've been thinking. Maybe I'll move back. Start over, closer to home." I smiled into the phone, my eyes filling with tears. "That sounds perfect," I whispered. He laughed. Then it settled. And just like that, the silence that had stretched for nearly a decade was gone, replaced by something stronger than before. Not the innocence of childhood, but the quiet strength of two people who had finally learned to forgive. It's been 3 years since that day in Boston, the day my brother said my name again. Now when I walk through the house, I hear his voice often. Sometimes it's in the kitchen asking if I've made coffee. Sometimes it's on the porch calling out, "Lil, come see this sunset." And every time he says my name, I feel that same small ache, the kind that comes not from pain anymore but from gratitude. He lives just 10 minutes away now, in a small house near the river. We have dinner every Sunday. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the kind of laughter that feels like coming home. When I look across the table and see him smiling, I think about how close we came to losing this, not because of hate but because of silence. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't always leave with noise. Sometimes it slips away quietly like a soft door closing. And if you're not careful, you might not notice until it's too late. But the beautiful thing about love, real love, is that it never truly disappears. It waits, forgives. It finds its way back, even after years of quiet. Now, when I think about that little white house in Vermont, I no longer feel sad. Because it's not just a memory. It's a reminder that family isn't about how often we talk, but about how deeply we care, even in the silence. So if you're listening to this and there's someone you've stopped calling, someone you've quietly drifted away from, don't wait for the perfect moment. Pick up the phone. Say their name. Because one day, that simple word might be the thing that brings you both home again.